The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there, while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables. Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen. Then the disciples came and asked Jesus, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" He answered, "To you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For to those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance, but for those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. The reason I speak to them in parables is that seeing they do not perceive, and hearing they do not listen, nor do they understand. With them indeed is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah that says, 'You will indeed listen, but never understand, and you will indeed look, but never perceive.' For this people's heart has grown dull, and their ears are hard of hearing, and they have shut their eyes, so that they might not look with their eyes and listen with their ears and understand with their heart and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. Truly, I tell you, many prophets and righteous people longed to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of God and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what is sown in the heart. That is what was sown on the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet such a person has no root, but endures only for a while. And when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, that person immediately falls away. As for what was sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the lure of wealth choke the word, and it yields nothing. But as for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word, understands it, who indeed bears fruit, and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and in another 30. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus.
Certainly this time of year is a time we're entering the heart of the summer, and the fields are beautiful and lush and green. And my trip out to Willow Bunch last Sunday morning early was a beautiful day, and I almost went off the road a couple of times just looking at the fields, you know, how beautiful and lush it is. Such a contrast to the winter months when it's just gray and white, and there's no leaves on the branches of the trees, and such a stark difference. But it's, in a way, appropriate we talk about that image of growth, that image of bearing fruit and the abundance of God during these times. Certainly the image of growth And the image of labor pains is such a descriptive metaphor for the world we live in. You know, St. Paul speaks of the growing pains or labor pains that the earth, we and the earth, nature itself, creation itself is groaning and longing for completion and for rest. Things are still unfolding and there's a lack, you know. We are growing, and yet because we grow, we lack. We know where we're going, we know where we could be, we know the potential, but we're not there. We're always changing. So we can always say that, okay, we can point out the things that are good that we're grateful for, but we can always point out what's lacking. We can always find that. And it's very important to recognize that how we take that. You know, we can be tempted to take that, well, it's all futile. You know, there's this and this, but we never get this, that it's never complete. For every problem we solve, there's a new problem that arises. That can get to a person after a while. There's a temptation to default to that sense of futility. But there is a futility in our being only if our being is all there is. For we're kind of cast into this world, creatures not finished yet, not only unfinished in their being, but unfinished in their nature. You know, we're not finished yet. We're gifted not just with life, but with life awareness in itself, a freedom to affirm or to reject the limited good that we have. So we have a choice to embrace life's limits and the gifts of being good, but not God, or reject it because we can't have it all. It's important to humble ourselves and recognize our creatureliness and our dependence upon God as creatures. Our gospel reminds us of the effect of the Word of God that it has on the world, and our first reading alludes to it too. The Word of God poured out into the world like rain, and it will return to God not without having accomplished or succeeded in what the purpose is set out to do. And so we can take hope in that reality. But what the challenge is with Jesus is we have to ask ourselves where our hearts are in terms of that receptivity. And he kind of lays out the different levels of receptivity, as it were. You know, the hard ground where the seed doesn't have a chance to even penetrate the soil before it's scooped up and taken away. Or the seed sown very shallowly and doesn't have a chance to take root. Yeah, we can all identify probably with all of those levels of receptivity in our own lives. I mean, just think of the times that you've been inspired by, maybe it was a movie or a book you read, or maybe even a homily you heard, and you're inspired, or a person you met, company you kept, and you're inspired, and the next day you've completely forgotten about what you were inspired with. You just knew that you were inspired, but you don't know what about, you know. Those are little examples of you know, where we are as human beings. We kind of there's so much thrown at us. What do we allow to penetrate us to our core? And how much time are we prepared to give that, you know? In our prayer time, is it token time, or is it time where we really immerse ourselves in the Word of God? What are the ways we can do that? Because there's something about the Word of God, God's teachings, that when we truly take in, we start to look at the way we behave and make our decisions each day, and we start to even think about our thought patterns and how we've been thinking wrongly, you know, really pondering. examining our consciences at the end of the day, like, where was God with me at this time? Or where did I really get off track? And really paying attention to that. Really, the Word of God has come into the world to improve the soil. Recognize that we're at different levels of receptivity, but that we can create a fertile soil with the help of God to assist us in our growth. And St. Paul says, the Word itself will be freed from its slavery to corruption and share in the glorious freedom of the children of God. But still, instinctively, we move more naturally to self-preservation and security. By nature, we fear and we hoard. We're afraid we're not going to have enough, And we don't trust enough in the abundance of God. Improving the soil means engaging in a transformation that leads us to a disposition of the sower, a spirit of generosity. And when we think of the sower God is God, who indiscriminately throws the seeds out. There's just an abundance, there's an endless supply of seeds. He throws it out, and the seeds land everywhere. And it's up to us to receive that and to allow that seed to grow. Ideally, if we are aware of and trust in God's abundance, then we breathe out generosity and forgiveness, and we will breathe in the air of generosity and forgiveness. To be generous and big-hearted, we have to first trust in God's abundance and generosity, and that's easier said than done. God's abundance. How does our fear of not having enough, how do we transform that into a spirit of generosity where we trust in the abundance of God? How do we allow that spirit to penetrate our hearts enough that we're not worried about not having enough, that we do depend on the providence of God fully and wholeheartedly, But the world is about scarcity, and you better make sure you have enough. You better not be too generous, because you're going to be at a deficit and it's going to cost you later. And there's a fear that goes with that. So maybe we feel we're still among those who see but don't understand. Maybe we don't have the knowledge of God that Jesus refers to in order that we may see what his disciples see. But we don't need to pretend to be rich soil when we know of our own shallowness. We don't need to pretend that we have rich soil in our own shallowness. What we need to do is recognize and be who we are and allow God to do the rest. And even though this world is subjected to futility, it's our trust in God and allowing that Word of God to penetrate our hearts that allows us to fertilize the soil in our hearts. It is a work in progress. And over time, perhaps we start to catch ourselves when we're missing a good opportunity to allow his word or his example or his teaching to penetrate our hearts. Or an example or an opportunity to be generous. Maybe we say, I kind of blew it today. But it's going to be different tomorrow. I'd make a mental note and respond with a spirit of generosity more the next day, slowly changing our patterns of thought and behavior to a spirit of generosity. And one of the things we fear is we want to see results. We want to see fruits of our good choices immediately. That's not how it works. The seeds are planted and there's nothing for a long time. Depending on what you're growing, things take quite a while to sprout up and grow. I have a plant in my rectory that somebody gave me. It's like a clump of dirt in a little vase, and I didn't know what it was at first. It looked like there was these little things that were coming out, but it was all brown, and it was just a clump of dirt with some root. And I thought, well, this thing's already dead. What do I do with this, And I set it out in front of my, it wasn't getting any sun apparently, but nothing was happening. I only have a west and a north-facing window. So the west window was a disaster because my couch is there, and I set it up there and it spilled dirt all over the couch. So I can't set it there. I put it in my north window. Not much sun coming in the north window. But by gosh, when I put it there, all of a sudden, after a week or so, I started to see little green blades start to emerge. And I was ready to throw this thing out. But it started to grow. Before I knew it, I had this plant with these long, skinny leaves and very green and very, very lush, very much alive. Didn't even have to water it much. That's important. I need plants that don't need much watering. That's how they survive. But the sunshine and a little bit of water, it's all it took. But it took patience, and I had almost written it off. It's important for us to realize the ways of God and to be patient and to wait on God. Even when it seems like nothing's happening or it's futile, because the ways of God are much beyond our ways. And it's a matter of hanging in there in spite of what we see or don't see, because the ways of God, again, we don't see, It's like Jesus, the way he explained in the gospel, those who don't see, they hear, but they don't hear. They hear and they see, but they don't understand. Well, none of us understand, but we all have patience. We all can have patience. We can trust in a God that provides. And the ways of God, we don't see where the rain's coming down. We don't watch the plants, see the plants grow quickly like that before our eyes. But over time, the fruits start to emerge. And we can depend on it. We can count on it happening. And we can count on our God. So it's a matter of us recognizing our impatience and recognizing we live in a world that seems to sometimes go against the message of God, that tempts us to say, nah, it's all futile, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. But the reality is, the underlying reality is that God's love is emerging through us in different ways, if we allow it to happen. And allow, even if we see ourselves as not being that receptive and impatient, work at it. Allow that soil to become more fertile, and allow his word to transform us by taking the time to listen, and allow the sacrament to do its work as well as we go out into the world renewed patiently in his love.